Wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Hello. We have Alexandra, Giovanna, Margaret, and myself. Alexandra, would you like to ease us into this conversation?
Grazie e buonasera Italia. Chers amis Canadiens et Canadiennes, bonsoir. Good evening to all our Italian, Canadian, and international friends who have joined us for a flight to the moon. Buonasera, Giovanna Melandri, Presidente del Maxi, e Livia Filotico, curatrice di questo evento. Ringrazio per il grande lavoro fatto per organizzare questo talk e per tutto che verrà organizzato per la giornata delle donne. My backdrop this evening is by a talented Canadian artist, Frances Adair Mackenzie, who's conceiving a video installation for activities in March on the occasion of International Women's Day. And I also want to thank the Maxi Museum. Thank you for keeping culture alive during these dark and challenging months. But tonight, we will be illuminated and enlightened by the renowned Canadian author, poet, and social critic, Margaret Atwood. Margaret, I'm so pleased to see you again, if only virtually. Our last meeting was on the shores of beautiful Lake Como.
It was, yeah.
It was indeed. And there were stars that evening.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I would never could get you to blush, but I would say that Ms. Atwood is not only one of Canada's most eminent novelists and poets, but a social commentator who's used her literary platform to challenge us. She's been outrageous and courageous in using her, what you call speculative fiction, to draw lessons and warnings for the future by critiquing the past. And as you're going to hear tonight, the moon is often referenced in Ms. Atwood's books and poetry, so it's not surprising that the name of the book she's donated to the Future Library, an initiative in Oslo, Norway, is entitled Scribbler Moon. But we're not going to be able to read that until 2114. I don't know if I can wait that long, Margaret. Like the moon, Miss Atwood can be unforgiving as she forces us to face uncomfortable truths. But also like the moon, she brings illumination and lights a path away from the darkness. Indeed, she's tackled some of the biggest challenges of our time, from climate change to the use and abuse of science, and of course, inequality, and most particularly the rights of women. So it's not so surprising that your face, Margaret, right now, larger than life, is currently emblazoned on posters in Poland with the simple message, Polish women don't give up. I want to thank you, Margaret. I want to thank you for opening our eyes, for questioning the man in the moon and the men on the moon, and to thank you for emboldening women to recognize and reject those who would constrain our roles and ambitions. And when I think of the moon, I also think of those who have ventured into space, among them two exceptional female astronauts, l'Italienne Samantha et la Canadienne, notre gouverneur général en ce moment, Julie Payette. These women are explorers, but also scientists and engineers. And if the past year has taught us anything, it's the importance of science and the key role women have to play in this domain. So I hope that tonight's discussion on the moon can inspire women and girls to reach for the stars in scientific fields. Il mondo ha molto bisogno di donne in questi campi e in tutti i campi. And indeed, we must all do our part. And while we're still very far from true gender equality, as Margaret well knows, in Canada, we're also very fortunate to have you as a model. En vous remerciant de votre attention, je vous souhaite une bonne conversation. I look forward to the insights and reflections this evening, which will no doubt be as brilliant as a full moon, a female moon, because we're here in Italy, la luna. Buona serata a tutti e a tutti.
Grazie.
Grazie. Thank you.
Grazie. Grazie, Madame l'ambasciatrice. Veramente parole che ci incoraggiano. I also want to greet on this Maxi social channel the great literary giant Margaret Atwood. We're really very happy to start this conversation with you in search of some guiding light, some guiding moonlight, drawing from artistic imagery. Now, just a very, very quick, two quick words on this institution. Maxi is the National Museum for Contemporary Art and is now today, as many cultural institutions all over the world, closed, shut down. So we really are a vessel between waves, maybe today a battleship, in fact, rather than a vessel, searching maps and with the help of artists. with the help of artists that are helping us to draw horizons into the hottest issues of our time. I mean, we have had artists discussing blaming and control society, issues of democracy, environmental issues. So this event, as it has been described, and I also want to thank Livia Filotico for having done this, is conceived as a toolkit to discuss under the light of the moon the futures, plural futures we have in front of us. So, Margaret, I really immediately want to give the floor to you, and I would like to do it with a small question. You have long had a torch in your hand, and you have recharged the torch with energy, beauty, and you have explored dystopies, futures, and presents. So first of all, I would like to ask you, how are you making sense? And how is, well, let's connect to our title and to our main topic. How are you making sense of the pandemic? How are you reacting to what we are all experiencing? Lack of control, fear, anxiety. How is the moon energy helping you through that?
Well, what a question. My goodness. Okay. So to begin with, it's not the first pandemic the human race has been through. And we know, looking back at history, looking back at ancient history, there were a number of pandemics in ancient times. We don't know exactly what they were because they did not, of course, have microscopes or anything like it then, but we know what the symptoms were. And we have an idea of the way those pandemics changed history. The one we probably know the most about is the Great Mortality, now known sometimes as the bubonic plague or the Black Death, but it was then called the Great Mortality. Yes. And people did think it was the end of the world. So by looking at how people reacted then, we have a kind of range of options for people now, and it's not that different. So you could try to help out. You could rape and pillage and have parties. Since the world was going to end anyway, why not? You could run away very fast, thereby spreading the plague. You could bear witness. You could keep a journal. And I hope a lot of people are keeping journals because they will be very useful to future historians. And those were kind of the options that people had. And from records kept at the time, we have seen how those played out. And you see people doing very similar things today. But you're asking me how I am getting through. Well, what do writers do anyway? They sit in a room by themselves talking to people who aren't there. So it's not that different. But as for recharging your batteries, if you are stuck with a creative idea, there are two good things you can do. Number one, go for a walk. Number two, go to sleep. Because when you're asleep, your mind is often working away on the problem that you couldn't solve when you were awake. And when you wake up, you will have the answer. Sometimes, other times not. So that is the thing about moon energy. It is inconstant, and it sometimes means illusion. But the moon has had a lot of meanings throughout history. One thing that has remained pretty constant because it's observable, the moon and the oceans are very connected. Mm-hmm. So if there is a moon god or goddess, they usually have something to do with the oceans as well. And the tides come in, the tides go out. The moon goes through phases. It waxes and wanes, and sometimes it disappears. So you can trace the way the moon has been interpreted quite positively in ancient times. It goes through a negative period in medieval and early Renaissance times because, of course, you don't want people worshiping a pagan goddess, do you? No.
You're
So it
absolutely-
became inconstancy. Here's the tarot card. You see here, there's the moon. There's two dogs baying at it. Baying at the moon means forget it. You're not going to get your wish. Two towers and a road between them. We don't know where that's leading, but down here we have a crustacean. What's the crustacean doing in there? We think it's a crab because moon rules Cancer in astrology. Yeah, so we think it's that, but it's somewhat menacing anyway. So that's from the Renaissance going forward, and nowadays the moon is having a comeback again, and people are identifying it as a source of female energy. It has often been identified that way in cultures with languages in which the moon is female. It's not always. Is that something to be going forward with?
Yes, absolutely. Where is the male moon?
Where is the male moon? Let's see now. I think in the Inuit culture, the moon is male. Right. Let's see. German. Anybody know any German? I have a feeling that it might be. I'd have to look it up. But you just need to go to every language and see whether it's a he or a she at the front, or an it can also be an it. But it's rarely an it. It's usually personified in some way.
And when is it a she?
When is it a she?
And which one of the she's is she your favorite? Tell us about
Which one of the she's? Okay, so I've got a couple of favorite she's. So one of them is Artemis.
Yes, it is. It is a he in German.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
It's der Mund.
Yes. So therefore that changes stuff.
Right.
What are they even thinking? But never mind. Yeah, so Artemis, the Greek goddess who was the sister of Apollo, the sun god. So you've got the twin sun and moon, and she was the goddess of the chase, often shown with a bow. Why does she have the bow? Because of the crescent moon. It's the shape of a bow. But also, strangely enough, she was in control of childbirth. So although she was a virgin goddess, she was somehow in control of childbirth. I don't know how you figured that out. And both Apollo and Artemis could shoot arrows of plague. So although health on the one hand, illness on the other, because if you're controlling health, you're also controlling illness, of course. So that's one of my favorite she's. Another one, think about this. Mozart, in his opera involving the Queen of the Night and Zoroastro, the magic flute. If you really think about that opera, the Queen of the Night is female. She's always shown with the moon on her head. She's a moon goddess. And he, of course, is associated with the sun. So you're having a custody battle being fought. Why is she so angry? I think probably it's a custody battle. They're getting a divorce. How could it be otherwise? Why is she screaming so much? So they both want Pamina in their chart.
Yes.
So they're fighting over who gets the kids. Have you ever thought of it that way?
Incredible.
Sun versus moon. But she's always a spectacular figure. She manifests. She's got a moon. She's got a specter. She usually has very glittery dress on, and has got arias that are a big challenge to anybody trying to sing them.
There you go. And Margaret, you introduced me to this incredible figure, de Poitiers, Our Lady of the Moon.
Yes,
Ooh.
yes.
Tell us about her.
Diane de Poitiers was the mistress of Henry IV of France. She was somewhat older than he, but so what? Because she renewed her youth, just like Artemis, Diana. She did it, unfortunately, by drinking liquid gold, which ultimately, although it gave her a very beautiful complexion, it ultimately killed her. But never mind, she often had herself painted in a moon outfit. Black and white were her colors because dark of the moon, full moon. And she loved to go hunting with her bow and arrows. So she pushed the symbolism as far as it would go. And if you think of pop stars today and creating their images, she was a pop star creating an image. And the image was connected with the moon. And the moon, of course, is connected with intuition. So intuitive knowledge rather than hard head knowledge. That is the kind of wisdom that you can get from the moon, according to ancient authorities.
Ancient authorities. I want to know more about them for a day.
But would you say, Margaret, that, I mean, one of the major lessons that we could still get from the connection to this energy is, okay, yes, we do have to go through phases, through cycles, and the time is not a straight arrow. It's cyclical, and is it? And only that attitude, which is so far away from the tech-driven society that in which we are living. And yes, I do have some real curiosity to ask you, because I mean, I cannot forget that you wrote the Handmaid's Tale when there was not internet yet, and I cannot forget that. I mean, you have described despotic structures that are now, you know, present among us when technology wasn't so central. So going back to the moon, I don't want to, you know, sort of evade the issue, but going back to the moon, maybe we really need to draw our attention to these two values. First of all, intuition, as you were saying, but also a cyclical aspect of time.
Okay, so there are two ways of arranging time, and one of them is linear, and right. we tend to think linearly ever since the codex book was invented, because if you have a bunch of scrolls, you can really arrange them anyway. But if you've got pages and they're bound into a book, you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's built into the structure of the book. So when people arranged the Bible into a book, they started with Genesis and they ended with the end of the world. So we got the idea that there's a beginning, and then there's all the stuff in the middle, and then there's going to be an end. Whereas if you have a cyclical arrangement of time, that doesn't happen. The wheel goes around, and then it goes around again, and then it goes around again. And if one world ends, you get another cycle, and you get the beginning of the next world. And time in, for instance, Indian mythology is circular like that. And in cultures that believe in reincarnation, you go through this life, and then it can either be a good thing or a bad thing. You come back in another body and you get another life. If you've been very bad, you might be a snail, but never mind. It's an incentive to behave well. So like that. And in the tarot, we have the Wheel of Fortune. And you can see the Wheel of Fortune is a cycle, and you have people going up to the top, and you get a crown at the top, and then you fall off and you get squashed underneath the wheel because it goes around. So you know the expression, what goes around comes around.
Right.
It's the same idea. And in the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance, the fortune and the moon were very closely connected. So when you go to Carmina Burana, the opening phrase is, O Fortuna. That would be...
O Fortuna, yes.
Yes. inconstant as the moon. You've made my life a hell. I hate you. Like that. So when you're on the downside, it can be quite unpleasant. When you're on the upside, you may think, hey, I've made it. But you have to be careful. Yes, but you have to be aware of the fact that it is a turning wheel.
Exactly. And you're in a phase.
Yeah, you may be in a phase. Well, we're always in a phase because guess what? We get older if we're lucky.
For sure.
Would you like to look at your hands? Hold up your hand and look at it. Look at it yourself. Okay, so this part here is the moon.
Okay.
Okay, so it is the subconscious, the unconscious, the nighttime, the private, the intuition. And that is where when we're looking at the moon on the hand, that is where we're looking, just so you'll know. I said I probably wouldn't be able to read any of your hands because I can't see them very well. And you were asking me earlier, how come? No, it's not close enough. Sorry. I need a flashlight.
I would love
your
to
hand.
My hand.
Yes. So why do I even know anything about this? It's from the study of literature, because there are so many references to tarot, planets, astrology, and palmistry goes along with them. So this is Hermes. This is Apollo, this is Saturn, and this is Jupiter. This is Venus here, that's the field of Mars, and that's the moon. And we look in all those places to see what is emphasized in your personality. So is your pointy finger bigger than your Apollo finger? Is it longer?
Yes.
Oh, your pointy finger is longer than this finger here? Your second from the end?
No, it's not. No.
It's not. No, it's not. Okay, if it were, you would be quite dictatorial.
Well, thanks for asking that again.
It's the pointy finger. Yeah, point.
So good, we got that saved, Giovanna.
Yeah.
Margaret, I want to ask you something about the moon and artists. We talked about intuition, and we talked about the moon being able to ride with the changes, and sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down, and there are moments of luck and moments of COVID. How do you think artists are particularly well suited in this historical phase, using the moon as a symbol to lead us out of the crisis that we're going through?
I would not depend on artists to lead you out of anything. They're not. They're not people with big pointy fingers.
How about scientists?
I would depend on leaders who can take advice from scientists and artists.
Right.
So what art is doing in this moment is creating, and it was kind of predictable that they would. They're creating art specifically for the internet. And if you would like to see an example of it, you can go to Against the Grain Theater, Messiah/Complex, which was and still is, because it's still playing right now, a Trans-Canada Messiah in all 13 provinces and territories. They have singers, I think it's 12 soloists, 4 choirs, Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and shot in venues across Canada from the Arctic to a hockey rink.
Right.
You kind of haven't lived until you've heard the baritone singing The Trumpet Shall Sound while skating around a hockey rink.
Well,
this is a new form. You couldn't do it without the internet. Yeah.
No, well, we experienced during the first lockdown some incredible artists working with the internet, and we reached out 15 million people in a way that it would have never been possible.
Yeah, so there are pluses in this thing that we're going through. And just to throw it into the conversation, if it hadn't been for the great mortality, we wouldn't have had the Decameron. Not that No, that was very comforting to all the people who died, mind you. But out of crisis comes art.
And art is also able to sort of draw new horizons out of moments that are really dark. Can I try and dig into another issue here, because you have dug deep in the forms of theocratic regimes, and I don't want to go into the hard politics, but this obviously, I mean, the founding fathers' fundamentalism, and this obviously leads us to the role of religion that their relationship with social structures. And we are talking about the moon, and I think we are all sort of walking on an edge of a conversation more on the spiritual side rather than the religious side, and what it has meant during the centuries. But I would like to push you away from theology and tune this conversation in this dimension of spirituality and what it really means for us today in the midst of these anxiety to understand the need of spirituality today. And I would like to do this. I found an incredible line by Albert Einstein. So this is not an artist. When he wrote, by the way, we recently had an incredible show at Maxi. It was called Gravity. And what we did, we put together some artists and some scientists working on gravitational waves and, black holes and black matter, etc. Anyway, this is Einstein when he says, everything is determined by forces over which we have no control. So again, here, the issue of no control. Human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust, we all dance to a mystery tune intoned in the distance by an invisible piper. The religious geniuses of all time, so he does acknowledge the fact that there can be religious geniuses of all times, have been distinguished by this cosmic religious sense, which recognizes neither dogmas nor God made in man's image. Consequently, there cannot be a church whose chief doctrines are based on the cosmic religious experience. It comes out, therefore, that we find precisely among the heretics of all ages men, and I would say also women, who are inspired by the highest religious experience. How can this cosmic religious experience be communicated from man to man, and again I would say from woman to woman, if it cannot lead to a definite conception of God or to a theology? It seems to me, this is Einstein's answer, that the most important function of art and of science, so this connects to Livia's question, is to arouse and keep alive this feeling in those who are receptive, the feeling of a cosmic religious experience. I would like you to react around this.
Well, first of all, let's not say that all religion is bad.
Right.
Because it's not. So it's like anything human, and any technology and any religion and any ideology, any human construct, including, for instance, monetary systems, will have a good side, a bad side, and a third side that you didn't anticipate. I sometimes call it the stupid side, but it's not always stupid. Sometimes it's just unexpected. Give you an example. When the internet was invented, it was invented by scientists who wanted to share their research faster. Oh, won't this be wonderful? And people built it out. Well, everybody will be able to express themselves. They'll be able to communicate. Isn't this great? Okay, and now we see that it might have this good side, and it does have this good side. It also has the bad side because it spreads misinformation, lies, and hate speech. And then the side really we didn't anticipate, but we should have known from studying the history of the printing press. We think that the printing press enabled us to have great novels and wonderful books. But as soon as it was invented, what poured forth? a lot of porn and sort of political tracts, you know. So same idea, except with the printing press. And every time you create a new technology, you're going to have, okay, we invented fire and we learned how to control it. So you can cook your dinner, or you can burn down somebody's house, or you can by mistake start a forest fire. Like that. So that's the way we are as human beings. Yeah. We're very clever. We invent lots of stuff. So we invented religions, but religions grew out of something that pre-existed them. Let us call them not organized religions. Let us call them embedded belief systems that were inseparable from the cultures in which they were embedded. So let's call them the way we do stuff. So religions came out of the way we do stuff, and they became what they are today, which is sort of international, structured, with a hierarchy. That just paralleled the growth of nations. You know, you could have a nation structure, you could have a religious structure, and you couldn't have any of them until you had agriculture that produced surpluses.
Yeah.
So that was the kickoff for both nations, armies, and centralized religions. When you have
agriculture was the kickoff for everything.
It seems to have kicked off a lot of things, including inequality of women.
Yep.
And how come that is? Because if you have agriculture, you can create a surplus. But what do you need to create the surplus? You need land. So how attractive is it to get hold of other people's land by invading it? Very attractive. But what do you need to do in order to invade somebody else's land? You need to create a standing army. And you need to feed the army on the surplus that you've made with your agriculture. So it becomes circular. What you need for the army, especially in the Bronze Age, where they were wearing this big clunky suits of armor, you can be a woman warrior on a horse with a bow. Not a problem. You've got the same ability. If you're a good horsewoman, you've got the same ability as a man with a bow. But if you're in a big clunky suit of bronze armor and you're having to go like this or like this with your sword, and those are heavy things, you need upper body strength. Right. So armies then became, unlike in Scythia, armies became male. So then you get the men being fed meat and wheat, and the women only being fed wheat, and therefore getting bone diseases. How do we know it? They've been digging them up.
Yeah.
How do we know there were Scythian woman warriors? They've been digging them up.
Right.
The Amazons were real. They had wild clothing like pants. Oh, and the Greeks were terrified of them. That's why they have all these statues of Greeks defeating Amazons. They were very scary. This inferior person, like shoving an arrow through you. I mean, it's in pants. It's horrible.
This sounds awful. Yes.
You know, if there was a archaeologist digging up the surface of the land today, they would find centimeters and centimeters of synthetic material.
I know.
So
yeah,
it's incredible if you think about it. I mean, the entropic dimension of
you're thinking of plastics.
Well, plastics, yes, synthetics,
stuff. Yeah. I'm gonna get a toaster buried with me, so that whoever digs me up will have a clue to the technology of my time. I mean, I think I should put a little note in. You know, this is not a god. It's a toaster.
And that does lead me to the question of your relationship with technology. I was mentioning before. I mean, I've thought over and over about this fact. I listened to an interview where you reminded me that you wrote The Handmaid's Tale before internet. But I do have to ask you, what is your relationship with the landscape of artificial intelligence, the algorithms taking over our societies? And I mean, how do you see how do you see that developing in terms of a new anthropology, really?
Okay, well, we don't know yet, but let us put it this way. Don't push the button. If this really worries you, get a landline phone, use the postal service, and don't go on the internet. You know, you can just avoid the whole thing. So William Gibson's novel called Neuromancer, there are people in it who have never entered the system. So according to the system, they don't exist. And therefore, they've got something very valuable in that society, which is anonymity. Yes, it is a problem. All of these things create their own problems. It used to be so that you could pay with cash money, you could pay with a check, you could pay with traveler's checks. You're pretty much forced to have a credit card now because a lot of things just won't accept any other method of payment. Just as you're kind of forced to have either a driver's license or a passport to identify yourself. But what does this mean? It means that you're in the system and therefore you're discoverable. So how to get around that?
And you're discoverable and you're surveilled.
You can be. There are ways of avoiding it, and that's where we get the dark net. That's where we get burner phones, and the whole vocabulary of evading surveillance and creating fake identities.
But are you scared of that kind of surveillance? I mean,
I'm too old. Nobody's going to bother with me. But if I were 25 and in a protest group, I probably would be worried. So who's creating a file on me and what for?
Well, there's another great lady researcher that I'm sure you're acquainted with, that has described very thoroughly this age of surveillance, the Shoshana Zuboff. But I really think that, could we say that this anonymity, how do you say this in English?
Anonymity, yeah.
Anonymity, could we say that this anonymity would be a moonlight value? I mean,
yes, absolutely. It's a shadow value. And yeah. So despite all of the surveillance, people go missing every year. A lot of people go missing every year. And where did they go? Have they been killed? Have they chosen to disappear? This happens all the time. So despite the surveillance system, there are obviously entrances and exits that people are either using or deep pits they're being thrown into, and nobody has been able to find them. So think of that. Yeah. So we're maybe in that respect, maybe we're not well enough surveilled, but every time you think you're doing something good in that area, you're also facilitating something bad.
I have a great story around that. I was a scholar at university studying economics in Rome many, many years ago. And my teacher, I was very, very lucky to have a great, really, inspiring teacher. His name was Federico Caffè. And he was a great economist from the Keynesian school. And those were the years when there's sort of the neoliberal, the neocon school was coming up, and he was really depressed because he felt that, culturally, they had lost the game. This was at the beginning of the 90s, end of the 80s, in fact, and he disappeared. One day he simply disappeared, and years after, and we went trying to search for him, and years after, he was found in a monastery. But this was way before the internet. But you could disappear.
Yes, you could. It's often kind of, if you do that, it's quite brutal to the people that you've disappeared on.
Very much so.
Yeah, so because they don't know what's happened to you. And that is why people are quite keen on, even if there's been a shipwreck or something, they're quite keen on recovering the body, because it does it's not an end to everything, but at least it's some measure of certainty.
Mm-hmm. Margaret and Giovanna, we only have 5 minutes left. Giovanna, may I ask you to ask Margaret one last question before we let Alexandra back into the conversation for her final goodbye?
Well, I would love to hear hours and hours of Margaret thoughts over everything. So I really don't know. I mean,
you don't want that.
Maybe yes. The question is more okay. We need creative thinking. Margaret doesn't know I am an environmentalist myself. I'm an activist in environmental movement since many years. We need creative thinking, and we need to understand why we are still not strong enough on reversing the climate crisis, the environmental crisis. I was leading the environmental delegation in Rio in '92. So this tells you how old I am, and this tells you how frustrated I am. And this tells you, in fact, I've come to the idea that there's really a perceptive fracture. We still think of the environmental issue as something, Greta broke that line, and we have to be so grateful for this generation to have done that. But anyway, I would like to hear some of your thoughts over this. I mean, this is the real.
It's crucial. Yeah, it is crucial.
Yes.
So it's not a question of all life on Earth becoming extinct. It's a question of human beings becoming extinct.
Right.
So we are a middle-sized air-breathing mammal. And where is our oxygen coming from? The oxygen that we breathe is 60 to 80% generated by plant life in the oceans. So kill the oceans. First of all, you'll get very stupid because your oxygen supply will go quite far down. And then we'll make lots of mistakes, and then we won't be able to run our high tech anymore because we won't have the brain power. And that's only kind of the end. So we'll wheeze to death. And once you can put that in one sentence, and once people understand that, you're going to get a lot more motion out of them. It's not just the forest fires, it's the droughts, the famines, and the quite perceptible things. It's the diminishing supply of oxygen that would finally finish us off. So you're not apart from nature. Every time you breathe in, you're breathing in the essence of life, which is oxygen, and that comes from nature. So you're breathing in nature. And what are the things we need? We need air, we need water. 3 days without water, you'll probably die. We need food. 2 weeks without food, and you're most likely dead, even if you have air and water. And we need shelter. So I would put that on a line below. So air, food, and water. Air, water, and food are the three things that we absolutely need, and they all come from nature.
There you go.
So we do need an augmented conscience rather than augmented reality around the fact that our breathing supply, our oxygen supply is diminishing.
Well, it will if the oceans die. So we're not there yet. But do the research. You will see that if we choke the oceans to death with plastic, or if we warm them up too much and kill particularly the northern marine algae, that's going to be it for us. Not for ferns. Ferns will probably do okay.
And with that, we have sadly come to the end of our time. We wanted to reintroduce very, very quickly the ambassador, Alexandra, who would like to say goodbye. But in the meantime, here we go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, Margaret. And
I really
want to
thank you, Margaret. Well,
lovely to see you all.
Always time spent with Margaret is time well spent. And Madame, you are the antidote, not to COVID-19, but to ignorance.
Well,
And
no, not necessarily.
but what we need to do is to look at things upside down, and then maybe we'll understand them. Thank you.
Yeah, so Wheel of Fortune upside down is actually a good thing.
Yeah. So, to all of you, thank you so very much for having been with myself from India. And it's been a real pleasure and a real honor to host you all. And for those of you who can go outside, and for those of you who are in a part of the world where it's dark, go outside and take a look at the moon. It's always a cheerful thing to end your day with.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.